Okay, Mel and Jay back again, and this time we're going to look at what we said earlier. I'm still got the same shirt in you, right? I haven't washed it. I probably am smelling to high heavens, but we need to get through this, plug this through. As long as I'm wearing this shirt, you know what we're talking. We're talking about that map. We're talking about Ur. We're talking about Haran. We're talking about that northern area in southern Turkey and how that this could be where the original Mecca was, or at least the name for the original Mecca. And now let's go through and let's look at a timeline, because some of the people are asking, can you show this on a map? Can you show us on a time scale what we're talking about? And I think it would be good if we did that, if we just go through each one of the dates. And you've picked out a number of dates that are important. 602, you've picked out 617, 622, 624, and 634. Could we look at those dates and unpack each one of those dates so people understand the sequence that you're going back, and then you end up with 636, the last one. So 602, 616, 617, 622, 624, 634, and 636. Let's go with each one at a time. Over to you, Mel.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just the first thing just to point out is I'm going to be showing you how my Iraqi-Persian thesis corresponds to Dan Gibson. So there will be a gap in my thesis where Dan Gibson's thesis takes over, if you like. So 602 is connected to Al-Hira. So we have the guy Iyas ibn Qabisa al-Tayyi. He was given the title or nom de guerre of Muhammad later, but he's appointed in that year as co-governor of Al-Hira with a guy called Nakhiragan, who was a Persian. We don't know where exactly he was born, this Iyas guy.
Can I just interrupt real quickly? What you mean, and just so people know, when we use the name Iyas ibn Qabisa al-Tayyi, his nom de guerre, or his nickname is Muhammad. Okay, that's why you're saying this is the Muhammad that is then you lift it out and then replaced to the Muhammad of the by the traditions. So, but his nickname is Muhammad. Okay, but we're calling him Iyas because that's his formal name, but Muhammad would be the nickname that we're referring to.
Yeah. And the reason behind identifying as Iyas is the fact that the early sources refer to the Tayyaye of Muhammad, and the leader of the Tayyaye at that time was this guy Iyas. So this is why we can say this is the person. Okay. Now, I don't know where he was born. There are suggestions that he was of mixed heritage. He could have been from, one parent might have been Arab, another parent may have been Persian. That's an area for further research. There was a book written a couple of years ago in Arabic, which was called Islam was created in Persia. And in that book, the author suggests that this very thing, that I think it was the father's Persian, the mother was Arab. So that might explain this mixed identity that we seem to see in the sources. So moving on from there then, in 617, the Lakhmid
And just
ruler,
for those who know, let's look at a map. Where is Hira? So we know where it is. Can you see where Al-Hira is? It's real close to what is today Baghdad, just a little south of what is today Baghdad. Back then it would have been called Ctesiphon.
Yeah. So in 617, the Lakhmid ruler Iyas ibn Qabisa was ousted from Al-Hira by Azad Bey and his Parsics, which was a particular ruling class in Persia. And so the idea is that after being ousted, this would have led to him wanting to plot his revenge. Now, it's interesting, the early sources, strongly influenced by the Islamic rulers, paint him as being still a friend of the Persians, still fighting on the Persian side. But if we think about this logically, there's no way someone who's been ousted would still be all friendly, lovey-dovey with the Persians. So it makes a lot more sense that this is the trigger point where he now becomes the enemies of the Sasanians. So here is the key starting point. Now, it's a bit messy for the next few years because there are different groups fighting against the Persians. They haven't yet united, but this is really the point at which he gets involved in all of this. He's a dutiful ruler for the Persians up to this point, but this is the moment where he decides that actually he's had enough and he's going to take the Persians on himself because he's interested in power. Rulers don't like giving up power. And and he's the ruler of a tribe, so he's got a lot of clout behind him. So he can do things even if the Persians don't like it. So the next key year in the timeline is 622. Now, there's a number of things that have happened in that year which are important. First of all, Heraclius liberates Cappadocia, which is in Turkey. In the 660s, Sebius tells us that when Heraclius captured Edessa in 622, the Jews fleeing from Edessa, or Ur, so Ur is appearing again, that the Jews met the Arabs in Tashkistan, which is northern Mesopotamia. They Judaized the Ismailites into Hagarim, which essentially means that they reminded the Arabs of their connections way back to Hagar and Ishmael, so they get all fired up with the sort of the ancient theology about their importance. He also mentions that they meet Muhammad here. Now it's interesting that they're meeting Muhammad really not far from the old Mecca that we mentioned. So the old Mecca is just outside Ur on the way to Haran. They have been evicted from Edessa, or in other words, Ur, by the Byzantines. They're on their way to Babylon, and along the route, which probably would have followed along the Euphrates River, Sebius tells us that they meet Muhammad there. So that's very interesting. So this is exactly where we'd expect them, expect the Jews to meet Muhammad, considering our theory up to this point. So our theory is based on factual information. And so the Muslims watching really have to deal with the facts. The facts on the ground are telling us this is where Muhammad is when he first meets the Jews. Please explain to me why he's meeting Jews way up in Iraq when the tradition tells us that he should be way down in the Hijaz.
Where there is no reference for Jews at all in the Hijaz. We can't find any historical support.
No.
The furthest south that we find any Jews is what we call Medina Sali, or Median Sali, which is much, much further north. No Jews at all in Yathrib, no Jews. Well, there's no Mecca, so there's would be no Jews there, but there's no Jews in Taif either. They're much, much further north. So that, again, the historical evidence on the ground has the Jews in the wrong place for the traditions to be correct.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is Sebius. So Sebius also says something more about Muhammad when the Jews met him. He says that he gave rousing sermons of an Abrahamist flavor. So he's an expert in the Mosaic law. So that fits in with what we know about him. He's not illiterate. He's very knowledgeable. But what he was able to do, and this is the key thing about his leadership qualities, is he was able to unite the clans. So the Jews are basically saying, we need to unite in order to win victory. So he organizes a form of unity among all the different clans. And it's interesting, a later coin refers to this year as the year that the believers settled their case. So this is the year when the Jews, the Nestorians, and the Sabians, and the Abrahamists all come together as one unit to kick off the yoke of the Persians. So that's another reason why it's important.
One more thing before you go on, between 622, remember also that Heraclius destroys the Persians on this date. And this is probably the reason for many of the Arabs, the Lakhmids and the Ghassanids, who hated the Persians. Their oppressors are now thrown off, have been defeated by the Heraclius, who is a Byzantine. He's a Christian Byzantine. And this would then help us understand why later, when the Abbasids do choose a date, why do they choose 622 for the Hijrah, for the beginning of their calendar, for the beginning of what they would always say is the Islamic calendar. Until today, they still use 622. It's probably because of this point right here, and that is that the Arabs finally came into their own at this time. Just to remind people that because 622 is significant when you're talking from an Arab standpoint, you're talking about the eradication of all this oppression that has been gone on for so many centuries before that. This is when it stops. So can you see then why that they would choose this date? Okay, good stuff. That all just fits the piece. Now, 624.
Okay, so this year has been suggested to me by a contact to my channel called Joe. He suggested that this may be the year of Dukar. Now, I haven't looked into the reasoning behind his choice of this year. There is scholarly dispute about the year, but this would fit perfectly if this was actually the year. So this is the year that Iyas is said to finally have got his revenge against the guy who kicked him out of Hira, which is Azed Bey. And this occurred on the day of Dukar, which is just north of Hira, a few months after Badir in 624. So it all fits to a piece. If you remember, 617, he was ousted from Hira. 624, the Battle of Dukar, he finally takes on this guy and wins the battle. So the conflicting reports that Iyas or his son were on the Persian side is not consistent with him having been ousted. This is an important point. So it is, in short, a deliberate hazing of the facts invented to hide his true identity and the fact that he was indeed actually working for Kavod II at this time, which would be on the opposite side to the Persians. The Islamic tradition has Muhammad saying that victory was achieved through him. So they get that part right, but if the Islamic tradition is correct that Muhammad said victory was achieved through him, that would make more sense if Iyas was fighting against the Persians. It makes no sense if he's on the other side. So they have told a half lie in order to disconnect him from Iyas, but they didn't do a very good job. And so we still can see what really happened from our sources. Now, so the other thing I would say is this is where Dan Gibson's theory comes into the fray.
Well, this is where the two come together and correspond.
So from this point, it's probably likely that having taken on the Persians, he retreated westwards to Petra, which is obviously a fantastic fortress area to battle from. Regrouped, gathered his troops, probably got additional troops, if you like, from southern Arabia, and then start hitting the Persians from different angles from there. What's interesting is we next hear of Muhammad through a source from 640, Thomas the Presbyter. He reports of the Tayyaye of Muhammad fighting the Romans 12 miles east of Gaza in 634.
Okay, now let's put a map up there and show you where we're talking about, because you can see Gaza is to the northwest. It's even beyond, further west than Petra. So this would have Muhammad way over in the west now, which would make sense if he was headquartered in Petra.
Yeah, absolutely. And this creates a lot of problems for Muslims because the Islamic tradition says he died in 632. We can see clearly he's now in Palestine. He's still alive.
In 634.
634. So 2 years later. This is the time when Abu Bakr supposedly is the caliph. So that's a major problem. There's also a reason, I think, behind why there is this anomaly, and that is when they were rewriting his story and they're trying to make him sound like Moses, they're using all the motifs of Moses, including the fact that Moses never entered the promised land and Joshua takes over. So he sees the promised land, but he dies before he enters Palestine. So they're trying to do that with the story of Muhammad. But what they weren't expecting is this diligent priest wrote this little note inside a book. It was locked away for centuries. No one knew about it. So if you imagine the Abbasids are writing these alternative histories, not knowing that this priest, Thomas the Presbyter, had written this note, which would be discovered centuries later and blows a gaping hole in the Islamic narrative. This is the reason why all of this early material is so exciting, because we can see clearly there's been a major cover-up, and we're seeing it video after video, just cover-up after cover-up. And Islam has an issue that it will have to deal with. It will have to come clean. It will have to rebase its religion on historical fact, because it's been hiding under the covers from this for too long. They will need to face up to the historical details and just accept that this is the history. You can't create a mythology any longer. You've got to at least get your facts right. And then, okay, maybe the religion survives after that, but at least it will be based on historical fact, not on mythology.
Okay, so Dan Gibson's material starts to appear in the 620s as well. So this would make sense as well. You can see the Qiblatain mosque is 620s. You also have the mosque that is facing towards Petra all the way over in Guangzhou in China, also the one in Sherman in India, in southern India, and Kerala, that's also facing Petra. So they all start to appear from 626, 627, 632, and that would fit exactly, since that's where Muhammad Tayyeh would be there by that time. But not that, and I would suggest that even earlier ones were probably at that time, because at this time these would still be temples that became mosques. These would be Nabatean temples that became mosques. But thanks a lot. This has been terrific. What you have done is by placing it in a timeline, by putting the dates there, the timeline is there. Let me put the time up again. And there you can see in 602 is Al-Hira. That's when Iyas was made governor of Hira. Then we jump to 617. That's where Iyas is then deposed. 622 is when Heraclius comes and liberates Cappadocia, and that starts the identity for the Arabs, because now they are out of the oppression of the Sassanians. In 624, you have the Battle of Dukar, where this Ilyas ibn Qabisa has finally got revenge on the fellow that threw him out there in Hira earlier in 602. And then he moves to the west from that time. Possibly it looks like he's moving towards Petra, moves in, and then he has this big battle in 634 in Gaza, even further west, and then dies in 636, according to Thomas the Presbyter. So thank you. This is terrific. Getting it on timeline helps us to understand what history is now telling us, not what the traditions are telling us. Because remember, the traditions are 9th and 10th century. They don't even have the right place. They don't even have the right time. They don't even have the right man. That's why it's so good to go back in history. Mel, you've got us the right man, and you've got us now in a timeline to see how it all fits together. This does not confront what Dan Gibson is saying. It actually complements what Dan Gibson is saying. God bless you.
Absolutely.
It's so good to have you. Okay, this is Mel and Jay putting into yet another chapter and another nail that starts to go into this coffin. God bless you. Do your comments down below. Please get them in there. We need to see them. We need to hear your reaction. And we'll haul Mel back again to answer your questions. Right. Mel and Jay, over and out.